I'm Michael, and today we're going to learn a bit about Starks. How many of you heard about Starks before? Okay. Oops. Okay, so we'll start with a short introduction. First of all, I want to say that I know that this audience here is very heterogeneous and everybody comes with different backgrounds. So I want this lecture to be interesting for everybody. So are there a few technical details? So if you're you're feeling you're a bit off, don't worry, I'm coming back fast and I'm summarizing it and continuing to something that you don't really need to know all the small details. Okay, so first of all, an intro to zero knowledge. Why would we want zero knowledge at all? So the problem is as follows. We assume we have two sides, a prover and a verifier. And the prover wants to prove some statement. For example, in our case, the prover wants to prove that she has a Bitcoin secret key that controls more than 100 Bitcoins. But the verifier is a skeptic, and given the price of Bitcoins today, I would be skeptic as well. So he wants to see the key. But she doesn't want to show it, and I understand her. So she doesn't want to show the key. She wants to convince him that she has this 100 Bitcoins or more. She can generate a zero knowledge proof that she has those Bitcoins. She has a key that controls more than 100 Bitcoins without revealing any bit of information at all about this key. Only the information that she really has such key. She doesn't even reveal how much Bitcoins it controls, whether it controls 101 or 200 or more. Only this information. So there are several systems that have zero knowledge. Starks is one of them, a major one. It has the following properties. First of all, the verification, the verifier is very efficient. It's exponentially more efficient than just doing the naive computation. In our example, if somebody gives me a secret key and I want to verify using the blockchain or using the unspent transactions tree that this key really does control more than 100 Bitcoins, and it takes me time, let's say t, then verifying a zero knowledge proof for such a statement would take about log t. Okay, practically it's constant time, and practically it's milliseconds. Okay, although zero knowledge has its own benefits, there are some benefits knowing a key that controls more than 100 Bitcoins. Okay, so ZK Stark of course has zero knowledge as well, and additionally the proving is very efficient, close to optimal, and there is no trusted setup. There are many features. We won't really see the complete construction of Stark. We will focus on the efficient verification and zero knowledge. So let's dive in to constructing a dummy Stark. We won't construct the general Stark. It will be hard in such a short lecture. We will choose a simple problem, the Fibonacci problem. Okay, everybody remember what is a Fibonacci sequence? Every element has to be the sum of the two elements that came before it. Okay, so in our case, we take the Fibonacci and make a riddle out of it. The prover claims that she knows two secret elements, A and B, such that if you start with them the Fibonacci sequence, the fifth element is 42. Do you know such two elements? I guess it wouldn't be easy in this time to guess something like that, but she can prove it. She can prove it easily, naively. She can provide the verifier, the two elements, A and B, and just from looking at those elements, it is hard to see that indeed the fifth element is 42, but the verifier can just recompute the sequence and see that indeed, in the end, in the fifth element, there is 42. Of course, this method has a few problems. There is no zero knowledge. and the verification is not very efficient. The verifier had to execute the computation from the beginning. Okay, so we will try to change something in the model that we had, and we introduce some kind of a notary. It's some kind of a trusted party, although it isn't really a party, it isn't really an all-powerful computer or a human being. In particular, for example, in real world, the notary could just see the secret and tell the verifier that everything is okay. But in our case, we will eventually replace the notary using some cryptographic methods. So the notary is very restricted. Okay, so she can't, in our case, just say, yes, the prover indeed knows A and B, such that the fifth element is 42. We will see an example in a moment. Another important point about the notary. The notary, in this case, because it is actually cryptography, is the only party that is trusted to follow the protocol. The prover and the verifier can use a protocol, can define a protocol using the notary. They both want to cheat. The prover might want to cheat that she knows a secret, but she really doesn't. The verifier would want to cheat by learning the secret. Okay? So they are both malicious in the setting. But the notary is the only one who is trusted to follow the protocol. Okay, so let's suggest another try to prove in zero knowledge the Fibonacci problem. In this case, the prover will pass the notary the explicit sequence starting with two numbers, and in the fifth location there is 42. What makes this sequence a Fibonacci sequence? That every consecutive three cells satisfy the Fibonacci constraint. Okay, so we can try a probabilistic test. The verifier would sample three consecutive cells and verify they satisfy the constraint. For example, it can choose those three and verify that 6 plus 18 is 24. What's the problem with such test? Any problems? Yes, he can learn the sequence. Another problem, let's say that the sequence is not 5 elements, but the claim is about the millionth element. Can anybody see a problem, another problem? The efficiency. Let's say the test that the verifier reads only three cells. So the test is very efficient.
Can you make them up?
Make them, no, but the notary follows the protocol. So in the moment that the prover passed the sequence to the notary and the verifier asks, I want those 3 cells, the notary has to give him these cells.
It's not high enough probability.
Yes, we have a problem with the soundness. The soundness is the probability of cheating. We say that a proof system has good soundness if the prover has low probability of cheating, and bad soundness if the prover has high probability of cheating. And in this case, we have very poor soundness. Let's see. For example, we have this sequence, which is not actually a Fibonacci sequence. Can anybody spot the error? 11, right. 7 plus 31 is 11. If it would have been a longer sequence, it would have been much harder. This is actually the only problem in the sequence. And only if the verifier would have chosen to test those 3 cells, he would have seen it. If it would have been a billion cells, if it would have been the millionth Fibonacci element, the probability of the verifier to catch a cheating prover would be 1 over a million. This is very poor soundness, right? Okay. So now, in order to go to our next steps, we have to get some algebraic background. This is not hard algebra. This is technically high school algebra, but we have to refresh it. So first of all, one algebraic tool that we're using is the following. If we have a polynomial p that we can represent as a product of another polynomial a and this simple polynomial x minus n, then of course n is a root of p, right? Root is something that the polynomial vanishes on, it gets 0. Then n is a 0 of p. And it works the other way around. N is a root of p if and only if p can be factored in such a way. We say if we can factor p in such a way, we say that p is divisible by x minus n, and a is the ratio. Okay? And another important algebraic property that we are using is interpolation technically. If we know, if we have d plus 1 points, there is exactly one polynomial of degree d that passes through all of them. Okay? The simple theorem that through every 2 points there is only one straight line that passing, it can be extrapolated to higher degrees. Is this okay? Any questions about it? Okay. Okay, so now it begins to be a bit more complicated. Now instead of passing, the prover passing the explicit sequence to the notary, the prover interpolates the sequence. It finds a low-degree polynomial, in this case a polynomial of degree 4, such that on the first indices 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, it is the Fibonacci sequence. It is the explicit Fibonacci sequence. Okay? And it passes this function to the notary. Technically, this function describes the Fibonacci sequence, right? And now we will say we are not stating the test exactly, but we are stating a condition. The prover want to keep his secret, want to keep her secret in secret. She doesn't want to reveal it, so she allows the verifier to ask the notary only 3 values from f, and they're all must be not from the range 1 to 5. Okay? This is not zero knowledge yet, but let's say that this is something that we start with.
5 in this case is the degree.
5 is what?
The degree in this case.
No, the degree is 4 in this case.
So why is it exactly 5?
Because in the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, we have the encoding of the sequence, of the explicit sequence. Okay, f of 1 and f of 2 are the secrets, and the rest are the sequence until f of 5, which is 42.
And the secret here is the Fibonacci structure?
The secret here is the starting point. Okay?
The 2 initial points.
Yes, the 2 initial points. Yes, exactly. Okay, any more questions about this? Okay.
Promise that the polynomial will be of degree 4?
If we start with 5 points, the interpolation is always of degree 4 at most. It might be...
But it's not promised that the sequence will be of length 5, so...
Yes, of course. So if the sequence would be of length million, it would have been promised that the degree of the polynomial would have been less than million. Okay? Okay, so now the verifier is allowed only to query 3 values of the polynomial f, which are not intersecting with the explicit sequence. It doesn't. I don't know what to do with only 3 points of f not from the sequence. So the verifier can use another witness, something that can attest that this polynomial indeed looks like a Fibonacci sequence on these first 5 points. Okay, so let's construct such witness. Notice that because the first 5 points describe a Fibonacci sequence, it must hold that f of 1 plus f of 2 equals f of 3, right? So we can pass f of 3 and we have this equation. Similarly, f of 2 plus f of 3 must equal f of 4, etc. So there is this set of equations which This explicit set of equations, of course, describes the Fibonacci problem. But this is a simple case of a more general problem that we have to do in Stark. We describe problems with such set of algebraic equations. Okay? So this is an example of something very general that we are doing. And of course, it has to satisfy the equation that f of y has to be 42. But even without this equation, it is hard enough to understand. So let's just forget about this constraint. It is done in a very similar way. Let's just verify that the sequence is indeed a Fibonacci sequence. Okay? So the verifier notices those equations are satisfied if and only if f describes the Fibonacci sequence on the first five numbers, right? So the verifier defines an imaginary polynomial q of x defined as f of x plus f of x of 1, the next element, minus f of x plus 2. Okay? We notice that q has to vanish over 1 and over 2 and over 3 because of the equations that we've seen in the previous slide, right? Okay? And moreover, q vanishes over 1, 2, and 3 if and only if the original polynomial f indeed describes a Fibonacci sequence, right? Okay. So now let's recall the tool that we had in the algebraic slide. In the algebraic slide, we've seen that because 1 is a 0 of q, then q has to be divisible by x minus 1. Similarly, because 2 and 3 are zeros of q as well, it has to be divisible by x minus 2 and x minus 3. So a generalization of this theorem shows that q has to be divisible by z, which is the product of x minus 1, x minus 2, x minus 3. And q is divisible by z if and only if the original function f indeed describes the Fibonacci sequence. Is it okay? Okay. Okay, so what does it mean that q is divisible by z? Q is the sum, is a linear combination of f. F is a polynomial of degree 4. Thus, q is a polynomial of degree 4. If we add two polynomials of degree 4, we get a polynomial of degree 4. Z is a polynomial of degree 3. Okay? So if q is divisible by z, it has a ratio of degree 1. Let's call it b. Okay? And there is such ratio if and only if q is divisible by z, as if and only if the original f is a real Fibonacci, describes a real Fibonacci sequence. So this b is the witness showing that f indeed describes a Fibonacci sequence. Okay? There is a polynomial b of degree 1 such that it is the ratio of q and z if and only if f is really a sequence, and we can move z and verify that z times b equals q. Okay, this is an equivalent claim. So this is exactly what the verifier does. The verifier test is to choose a random r, not from the sequence, okay, because the prover doesn't allow him to read anything below 5. So he chooses a random r bigger than 5. And asks the notary to give him f on r plus 1, and r plus 2. Okay, this way he can construct q. And asks the notary to give him b on r. And verifies that b times z on r equals q on r. Okay? So this is the test. It is a very simple test. But let's see why it is working. So completeness of proof system is the property that if a claim is correct, then the prover can always generate a proof that will satisfy the verifier. Okay? So in this case, of course, the verifier doing this test is satisfied. If B is indeed the ratio of Q and Z, then moving Z to the other side is exactly this equation, okay? So we will see, so we see why this system is complete. Now, the soundness is the property of, is the probability of the prover to cheat, is something a bit more tricky. Let's see how we analyze it. So, assuming that f is not a valid Fibonacci sequence, there is no b, which is a ratio of z and q of degree 1. There is just simply no such. Thus, the prover has to give as b some other polynomial of degree 1. In this case, what we get in the equation, that in both sides we have polynomials of degree 4, and we want to verify if they agree on some point. But two polynomials of degree 4, if they are different, they can agree only on at most 4 points. Because, right, if I do the difference between the two polynomials, I get yet a degree 4 polynomial, and it has only at most 4 roots. Okay? So there are only 4 possible R values that would satisfy this equation. So if the verifier chooses R from some big domain, let's say 1000 to 2000, okay, there might be, in worst case, at most 4 values of R that satisfy this equation from this domain. Okay, that's the probability of the verifier being cheated is at most 4 over 1000, which is much better than what we had before. I think it is great. Any questions about this technical part? It was a bit technical, but now we are coming back.
What is the degree that is used in practice today? Probably not
So the degree, so similar to Fibonacci, the degree that used in practice depends on the problem. Okay, so Stark's work on problems. Technically, Stark's used for programs. The problems are programs like Fibonacci, and the degree is linear in the trace length of the program. If you execute the program naively and you get a trace, all the registers in every timestamp, so the degree is linear on that. Okay. Any more questions about it? Okay.
You said it was a low degree polynomial, but if it's not 5, it could be like a million. It's not that low, isn't it?
Yeah, it's low degree polynomial is saying that the degree is bounded. I have a bound that I can check it is lower than this. Because if it's a million, it can be anything between 0 and a million, but it doesn't go to billiards. Okay, so this system has good soundness. It is actually, just a second, almost succinct. If somebody notices what is the problem with succinctness, mail me your CV, please. And it doesn't have zero knowledge, because technically, everything the prover did and everything the notary did was deterministically determined by the secret. Okay? So it can't be zero knowledge. If the verifier reads some value, this value changes deterministically with the secret chosen. Yes?
The third bullet answer.
What?
The third bullet is the answer.
Okay, great. It's called an excellent question.
Yeah, question?
Yes.
So you said with soundness, it depends on the proportion between 4 and 1000, right?
Right. So you can always choose the domain of the queries or the domain you choose R from to be much bigger than the domain of the trace.
So this can be like exponential within the...
No, it can be linear. It can be linear, and instead of doing, let's say it is 4 times bigger, okay, than the trace. then for a single query, you have probability 1 over 4 to be cheated. Do several queries, and the soundness gets better exponentially. More questions? Okay. So now the problem is zero knowledge. Let's solve this problem. Anybody here heard of Shamir secret sharing? Okay. So technically, it is Shamir secret sharing, extended Shamir secret sharing. So polynomials additionally has another neat property. We can hide secrets in polynomials. So in this case, if we think about the line, right, we had this algebraic property that given 2 points, there is only one line passing through those points. But what if I give you 1 point, okay? Let's say 0, 0, and only one other coordinate, x coordinate equals 1. What are the possible y coordinates if I know that a line passes through 0, 0 and another point with the x coordinate equals 1? Every possible y coordinate can be, right? Everything, I didn't give you any information about it. It can be anything. Okay, you agree? So this can be extrapolated as well. If we have a parabola, for example, a polynomial of degree 2, and all we know about it is only 2 points of the parabola, we don't know anything about any other third point. So it can, for example, cross the y-axis at any point, and we really know nothing about it. Okay, know nothing, zero knowledge. You see the connection? Okay. So in the Shamir secret sharing, we can hide a secret in 0, okay, and give other points of the polynomial, and only if you have enough points, you can find out the secret. And if you don't have enough points, if the number of points is less than the degree of the polynomial, you know nothing about the secret. So this is the property we are using. So the problem was, I recall, that the functions were deterministically determined by the sequence. So we will do the same as Shamir, and we will add a few random elements to the sequence before we do interpolation. Okay? Instead of doing interpolation on only the sequence, we draw some random elements to f of 6, f of 7, f of 8, f of 9, and when we interpolate it, now we'll get a polynomial of degree at most 8. It is higher degree. But recall that in the test that we did before, we didn't really care that we did interpolation only on the elements 1 to 5. We tested that this polynomial of some known degree, and this degree can be larger, satisfies the Fibonacci relation over the points 1 to 5. Okay? So doing this extension with random elements and using it to do the same protocol that we've seen before gives us both the succeedance, the efficient verification as we had before, and doesn't leak the secret. Yes?
But when the verifier will construct its testing polynomial z and q, if he by accident asks for the values 6 to 9, he will construct the wrong polynomial.
No, because it doesn't. The verifier doesn't construct the polynomial at all. The polynomial now, the polynomial f, now is defined differently. The polynomial b is a bit different as well because q is different and b is the ratio of something a bit different. It doesn't reconstruct the polynomial. It tests this equation, okay, that we've seen is correct if and only if it's correct for every r. If and only if f describes a Fibonacci sequence on 1 over 5. And this if and only if was not affected by the fact that we started interpolation from 1 over 5. We could start it from something bigger. Okay, so the correctness is not affected. The soundness was affected by the degree, okay? So now the degree is higher. Instead of having the polynomial of degree 4, we have polynomials of degree 8, okay? And if the verifier queries a random R from 1,000 to 2,000, the probability of cheating now would be 8 over 1,000 instead of 4 over 1,000. Okay, did it answer the question?
Yes.
Okay. Any more questions about it? Yes.
So is it perfect zero knowledge?
It is perfect zero knowledge, yes. Any more questions? Okay. So a few takeaways. We dived a bit into Starks. I didn't cover everything. Of course, Starks has a lot of components. But I want you to take away the definition of completeness, that this is the fact that if something is true, the verifier will accept it. Soundness, that if something is false, the probability the verifier accepts it is very small. And zero knowledge requires randomness, because if the prover doesn't use randomness, everything the prover generates is deterministic in the secret. And polynomials are useful for zero knowledge and soundness. 2 more slides to compare with other zero knowledge systems. So there are many other zero knowledge systems that use the similar structure technically. We have a prover and a verifier, and they use this cryptographic notary. And the main difference is what kind of cryptographic notary they are using. Let's see. So ZK Stark, Aurora, and Ligero all use a very similar notary based on the collision-resistant hash functions. Okay? It's Merkle trees and Fiat-Shamir heuristic, if somebody knows what it is. If no, you can ask me later. I won't get into it right now. Bulletproof, I guess you heard of bulletproofs as well. Their notary assumes the discrete logarithm problem using elliptic curves, as we've seen in the previous lecture. And we have the ZK Snarks that use a bit different notary, but as well assuming the discrete logarithm problem on elliptic curves. And it requires a trusted setup. Yes?
What does the character stand for Stark and Snark?
Okay. Stark is a scalable, transparent argument of knowledge. Scalables, it means that the verifier is very efficient, is exponentially more efficient than naive execution. And the prover is strictly quasi-linear compared to naive execution. Transparent means that you can say it doesn't need a trusted setup. The proof of Starks are like mathematical proof. You don't have to trust anything.
Trusted setup, you mean the notary in your example?
No, the notary of Starks, when it is actually a cryptography, you don't have to trust any party. In Snarks, you have a trusted setup that you actually don't trust cryptography, you don't trust cryptographic assumptions, you trust a human being that did something correctly, that erased the secret. If you want, I have an extra slide on it as well. If there are no more questions, I can go to this extra slide to describe the difference. Okay, so it will take a minute. Here it is. Okay, so in Snarks, the system assumes a trusted setup. In a way, it's like a scratching card. If I go now to a kiosk and I show you that I can choose 5 scratching cards and they are all the winning cards, you will be amazed, right? But what if you would find out that my uncle is the one printing those cards? You would be suspicious, right? In Snarks, this is the way it is. There is some trusted setup, like printing out those scratching cards, that if there is a secret leaked out, for example, what IDs are the winning cards, then false proofs can be generated. You can prove anything easily. In Starks, there is no trust setup. It is transparent. It is more like the lottery. You first fill the numbers. You can't know anything about what are the winning numbers because they are not defined yet, compared to the scratching card where the winning cards are defined before you choose them. So you fill the numbers, and if we assume that this lottery machine taking out balls is okay and nobody tampered it, and you can really take 5 weeks in a row and win the lottery, you're probably doing something amazing. Okay? So I hope this shows the difference. Is it?
Yes. Is there any advantage for snarks over starks?
Yes, there are advantages for snarks over starks. Using their notary, the proofs of snarks are much shorter. The proofs of snarks are about 300 bytes. They are measured in bytes, in hundreds of bytes. The proofs of starks are measured in kilobytes.
Sounds irrelevant for today's bandwidth.
It depends. In the blockchain, storage means a lot, but it is an advantage. Yes.
So maybe you can say that like transparency is not exactly a binary thing. Like it's not exactly like a fully transparent and a fully non-transparent scheme, because there is like pretty good solutions today, like based on MPCs for generating a trusted setup, where like as long as one honest party within like a lot of
But you still reduce your trust to trust in people. You have to say there is one honest person. You don't reduce your trust into cryptography. Here in Starks, you don't have to trust anybody. Okay? If I publish Star code, you can read it, and you don't have to trust me, and you can use it. In Snarks, you still have to. You can't reduce your trust to math.
So is the only trade-off for having a transparent scheme in the proof of the size? What about the proving running time?
In proving running time, Starks are actually better because the Snarks are based on elliptic curve cryptography. They are doing a lot of elliptic curve arithmetics, which is expensive. Starks, as you've seen, doing very algebraic thing, actually over finite field. Doing algebraic arithmetic over finite field is much cheaper than elliptic curve arithmetics. Any more questions? So let me go to this last slide. If you have any questions, please ask me, and you can mail me as well if you have a question, and we are hiring. Yes?
What are the coolest uses, or like the most important uses that this has an effect on the blockchain industry? Specifically asking, does this affect scaling? Does this affect
Yes.
storage?
Yes, okay, so it affects everything. So first of all, a nice simple example without going into details. Right now, in order to trust the Bitcoin last block, you have two options. You can be a full node and verify the entire blockchain, which would take, it takes me a few days. So it is costly. Or you can trust some other entity to go to a blockchain explorer and to believe that they are doing their work right. With Stark, for example, one can generate a proof that the current block, given a genesis block and the current block, that the current block is is indeed, for example, the millionth block in the blockchain, and give you a proof of a few kilobytes. You download this block and the proof from the internet. It takes you a few seconds. You verify the proof. It takes you a few milliseconds, and then you are cryptographically sure that this is indeed the last block. There are a few more usages that I don't want to go into because they will be longer to describe. Yes, and of course privacy as Zcash, for example. Yes.
Just want to come back to the example. You introducing example. So
The example, this one,
now with the 500 Bitcoin.
with the 500. The first slide.
Yeah, exactly. So in
Yes.
How exactly we can do this?
Okay, so Starks, the syntax of the input of a Stark, technically I didn't define it formally. You can define a program that we both agree on, and I'm, as a prover, proving to you that I know a secret input X such that this program given X finishes halts with return true, okay? So this program could, for example, given a secret and given a public input that we know, which is, for example, the current UTXO, okay? The root of the UTXO, prove that the secret is indeed a secret key for an account holding this much unspent transactions, okay? So this is something that you can really do with Starks. Yes?
I want to go back to the question about what you said about synchronizing the Bitcoin blockchain.
Okay.
So the verifier, what data does it must have?
The verifier, the Genesis block, the number of blocks had to be generated till now. Okay, it's today's time divided by 10 minutes, the claimed block, and the proof.
There could be lots of different claimed blocks.
Okay, so if you have a fork, so you have a few proofs that are all legit for different blocks because this is the state of the blockchain. Or did it answer the question? Or
Yeah.
okay, yes.
Is there a security difference between the security assumptions of Starks versus Snouts? Like
Yes.
DLP versus CI?
Yes. So CRH is much weaker assumption because we all believe in SHA-2, and if SHA-2 is broken, we have SHA-3, and CRH is something very basic. The discrete logarithm problem on elliptic curves is an assumption that we know is breakable with quantum computing, for example. Okay, while CRH are not breakable with quantum computing. And it might be even breakable in polynomial time. We don't know. Any more questions? Yes.
Is it already possible to actually play with it, like Socrates kind of things for Stark or not yet?
I didn't understand. Sorry.
My question is it possible to play as like a developer with that tool, or either like already primitive you can use to implement like
The primitive that used to construct Stark?
yeah.
Okay, the primitives are actually a CRH, which is, for example, SHA-2, collision-resistant hash function, and we use it as well, not only as a CRH, we use it as well as a pseudo-random function. Okay, we assume that if somebody, no one can find an input that gives a special hash value. If I want to get 10 10 10, it will be hard for me to find an input to SHA that will give it. So we use it as a CRH in order to use the Fiat-Shamir heuristics to construct a non-interactive proof. And technically, those are all the assumptions.
I think I'm explaining like is there like a library if possible that we can already
A library to use. Okay.
So I'm not sure I understood what the preprocessing you would need to turn like a program into a Stark, because like for Stark it's turns from that into
Yes. Okay. So first of all, there is a library, libstark, as an academic project, which is not very efficient. We are currently at StarkWare working on a much more efficient implementation. The compilation of general programs to Starks, to this algebraic representation, is a hard problem because compilation is always hard. It is trivial to do it naively, to generate a non-efficient equation set, but it is hard to do it efficient. So in libstark, there is a compiler from a Turing complete assembly called TinyRAM. Okay, so this is like this is an academic work, but right now we are mostly working on designing efficient, fine-tuned algebraic representation for specific problems. And the general compiler for general computation is not something that we are designing right now. Okay, any more questions?
Can you repeat this Turing complete assembly tiny what?
Tiny RAM. You can find it
RAM?
tiny RAM, like RAM machine, random access machine, tiny RAM. And yes, and if you Google libstark, you will find the repository where there is a compiler from tiny RAM. You can write a tiny RAM assembly and compile it and play with Stark, but again, it is not very efficient. We have something much more efficient now. Yes?
So I think you talked about rough assumptions for different non-trusted set of zero knowledge systems.
Yes.
Can you speak a little about the different trade-offs between the different systems?
Yes.
Or
Yes, of course, I would love to. Okay, so Starks, if you noticed, I choose the Fibonacci problem, and I showed you the Fibonacci for a sequence of length 5, and you believe me, and I think you are convinced that if it wouldn't have been 5, it would have been 1,000,000, it is easy as well, okay? Stark technically is designed to use a loop-like structure of programs. For example, verifying a blockchain, okay? But if you give Stark something which doesn't look like a loop, okay? It is suboptimal. There are better solutions. Aurora is a system we have recently designed, similar to Stark, that is much more efficient, is fine-tuned for circuits. Circuits is a program with no loop-like structure. Ligero is similar to Aurora. The difference is that both Stark and Aurora, the proof size and the verification is succinct, exponentially smaller than the naive execution. In Ligero, the proof size and the verification is only square root of the naive verification. Bulletproof as well doesn't get usage of any special structure, and the verification there is linear in the naive verification. For example, if you would have made a proof for the whole blockchain, you could say that you know some secret blocks in the middle, but the verifier would have been done the same work and much more. There is a price for using elliptic curve arithmetic. Snarks is technically designed for circuits as well. Thus it can't be succinct in a way, but the verifier hides it by passing the heavy payload to the trusted setup. Technically, the trusted setup does all the non-succinct work. It does a lot of work. It generates a huge key, which is linear in the trace, in the circuit size. And the only thing that it does is the following. It gives the prover, this is some encryption key. In Stark, they use encryption, and gives the verifier the R, okay? This is exactly the trusted setup. In our example, the verifier, after the notary got something, choose the random R. In Snarks, this R is chosen before any proof is generated. So of course, if the prover would have known what this R is, it would have easily could generate a false proof. So, but the proof in the end is very short, as I said, and the verification in the end, after you do this trusted setup, is very short as well, a few milliseconds. But something important to say, this trusted setup is per circuit. If you change the circuit even a little bit, you have to do this trusted setup all over again. Okay, any more questions? Okay, thank you very much.